Today we're cutting through the noise of consumer phones and smart TVs. We want to understand one of the world's most consequential, complex, and, well, perhaps most controversial business empires, Samsung.
Yeah, when most people think Samsung, they think Galaxy phones or maybe a QLED TV, but those end products, they're just the highly visible tip of a truly massive iceberg.
Massive icebergs, right.
I mean, we're looking at a global conglomerate so vast that at one point back in 1995, its annual revenue, and we're talking $87 billion, equaled something like 19% of the entire GDP of South Korea.
Wow, 19%. That scale is just staggering. It really speaks to a level of national influence that, honestly, few private companies ever achieve.
And it's not like they've slowed down. Today, its core electronics division alone reports consolidated revenue exceeding $220 billion, trailing 12 months.
So our mission today is to unpack exactly how a simple trading house achieved this kind of dominance.
Well, we've got sources detailing the company's really aggressive, sometimes, frankly, legally questionable ascent. And then there's the radical cultural transformation that, you could argue, saved it from global obscurity. And, of course, its current high-stakes future bet.
Which is all about vertical integration, right? Fueled by AI and these incredibly advanced semiconductors.
Exactly. It's all connected.
This isn't just a story about selling hardware then. It sounds like a masterclass in, I don't know, extreme strategic vision, and maybe an essential guide to the complex, often kind of opaque power dynamics running the modern global supply chain.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So the initial phase of Samsung's life, say from 1938 up until the late 1960s, it really reveals the core DNA of the company.
Which is?
Relentless diversification and really aggressive capital acquisition.
It's funny, the story famously begins not with some cutting-edge chip, but with, well, groceries.
That's right. Samsung was founded in 1938 by Lee Byung-chul. It was a grocery trading store focused on exporting things like dried fish and noodles.
But what's truly fascinating here, I think, is that this humble start immediately established a clear pattern. They didn't just linger in groceries, did they?
No, not at all. They were constantly moving, always looking for the next area that promised scale.
Okay.
So that initial trading structure, it quickly morphed into essential industrial pillars, the kind required for a developing nation.
Especially after the Korean War, right? That must have been a key moment.
Absolutely. Following the devastation of the war, Samsung immediately moved into manufacturing textiles. They set up Kale Industries, which grew really rapidly into the largest wool mill company in South Korea.
Wow.
Then they acquired the Kaledang sugar refinery in 1953, and they turned that operation into South Korea's largest food company.
So just 15 years in, they'd gone from trading dried fish to dominating food, textiles, manufacturing, laying the base for this huge industrial complex we see today.
Precisely.
But reading through the sources, that diversification wasn't purely organic growth, was it? There seems to be a much more complex and frankly controversial mechanism driving this expansion during the post-war recovery.
Yeah, this is where the political context is just central. And it highlights the origin of the whole K-ball structure itself.
Okay, explain that.
Well, the sources claim that during and immediately following the Korean War, the company leveraged international aid.
International aid, you mean like reconstruction funds?
Exactly. Funds specifically allocated for national reconstruction, humanitarian relief, but used, allegedly, to rapidly fund its business expansion.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was highly inflammatory at the time. I mean, the civilian population was still enduring incredibly harsh living standards, while capital supposedly meant for public good was being diverted.
Using reconstruction funds for private enterprise, that's a huge ethical challenge, obviously. Yeah. But strategically, wow, it must have provided immense leverage.
It provided extraordinary leverage. This kind of debt-fueled, you could say government-backed growth meant that by the early 1960s, Samsung had accumulated so much capital and debt.
How much?
Enough to become the country's fourth largest borrower. They'd built this vast empire in just, 2 decades?
And the societal dissatisfaction that arose from this, the public seeing a handful of businesses getting rich while the country stayed largely agrarian and poor, that led to political upheaval, didn't it?
Absolutely. The widespread anger over the slow recovery and these perceived abuses of aid, it led directly to the overthrow of the Rhee government in 1961.
Okay, so new government comes in, Did they crack down?
Well, not exactly. The subsequent military-backed government, led by Park Chung-hee, they didn't dismantle these powerful business groups
Why not?
because their priority was stability and rapid industrialization. So instead, they kind of formalized and even encouraged business expansion by groups like Samsung.
So they basically doubled down on the cable model.
You could say that. It was a critical turning point. It sort of codified the Taeball's ability to operate almost unchecked, often getting preferential government financing.
So the foundation of Samsung's power is just deeply intertwined with post-war politics and necessity.
Deeply.
Yet, it wasn't until the end of that decade, 1969, that the founder, Lee Byung-chul, made that pivotal decision to jump into technology. He saw the future wasn't textiles and sugar anymore.
Yeah, he recognized the future was electronics. So the formal entry was 1969. Their first product, a black and white TV, launched in 1970.
Okay, first TV. But here's the crucial point you raised earlier. Their initial strategy was just volume, right? Pure scale.
Pure volume. They were chasing scale to compete with, Japanese and American brands, but the products often suffered from pretty low quality.
And they were dependent on imports.
Heavily reliant on expensive imported components. Things like specialized glass from Corning or integrated circuits from U.S. firms.
So their whole cost structure, their quality perception, it was built on this unstable foundation. Imported, costly, hard-to-source foreign parts. That must have just crippled their long-term profitability and competitiveness.
It really was a structural flaw.
Yeah.
And it was unsustainable. They realized pretty quickly the volume-centric approach was a dead end if they couldn't control the underlying components.
So what did they do?
Well, to solve this dependency and the rising cost issue, they immediately started diversifying again back in the 60s and 70s, but this time into related tech sectors.
Like what?
Electromechanics, telecommunications, and critically, semiconductor manufacturing.
Semiconductors. So that internal component drive, born out of necessity, really, to solve an immediate cost problem. That's what accidentally sets the stage for their modern dominance.
You got it. It wasn't some grand vision initially, more like fixing a leak. But it ended up being the foundation for everything that followed.
Okay, so that structural flaw we talked about, prioritizing quantity, sheer volume over actual quality, it created a genuine existential crisis for them.
It really did. By the mid-1980s, Samsung had the scale, sure, but it lacked the reputation. It just couldn't compete head-to-head with the global heavyweights in technology on quality.
Which brings us to 1987. Lee Kun-hee takes over as chairman from his father.
Right. And Lee Kun-hee, he was the visionary who really got that the game had changed. He clearly diagnosed that Samsung's reputation, cheap, high volume, but ultimately kind of disposable products, was an existential threat in the high-tech global market.
So he knew they couldn't just keep making cheap TVs.
Exactly. He understood that to survive the 90s and beyond, they had to make a leap. They had to become world-class innovators, not just, contract assemblers churning stuff out.
And this realization led to one of the most famous and, frankly, radical strategic overhauls in modern corporate history, the New Management Initiative.
Yeah.
Kicked off in 1993.
Yeah, and this wasn't some minor tweak. It wasn't just rearranging the org chart. It was a philosophical and cultural declaration of war against their own past.
A revolution, really.
It was an ideological revolution, enforced from the very top. Lee Kun-hee famously gathered executives in Frankfurt, Germany, of all places, and issued that rallying cry.
Change everything but your wife and kids.
That's the one. It signaled a complete, irreversible break with the past. The new mandate was crystal clear. A non-negotiable trifecta.
Okay, what were the three parts?
1, quality must supersede volume. Always. 2, innovation must be relentless, constant R&D. 3, global expansion must target the highest margin markets, not just the easiest or cheapest ones.
Aim high.
Aim high, exactly.
And the initiative wasn't just like motivational posters about quality, right? It required serious structural changes to break decades of bureaucracy
Especially
in a K-ball structure.
Oh, absolutely. They had to fight that bureaucratic inertia tooth and nail. And you see these proactive, honestly startling changes for a Korean industrial giant at that time.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like promoting women into senior executive ranks, which was almost unheard of, rewarding merit over seniority, another big shift, and actively discouraging those deeply ingrained, consensus-driven bureaucratic practices that just slowed down innovation cycles.
Trying to make it faster, more agile.
The goal was exactly that, make Samsung culturally agile enough to compete with those hyper-innovative US and Japanese tech giants.
But the moment, the symbol, that truly institutionalized this cultural shift, certainly in the minds of employees and the global press, it has to be that incredibly dramatic 1995 product burning incident.
Oh, yeah, that was pure corporate theater, but incredibly effective. A rare, powerful public demonstration of commitment to this new quality-first management.
What actually happened?
Lee Kun-hee himself ordered the destruction of defective inventory. The reports say it was around $50 million worth of products, things like 150,000 wireless phones.
$50 million. Did they just, recycle it quietly?
No, that was the point. They didn't just quietly recycle it. They destroyed it publicly, right there in front of employees, sometimes using bulldozers.
Bulldozers, wow.
Yeah. The message was unmistakable. An irreversible break from the low-quality mass production mindset. It showed this rare willingness to accept massive short-term pain for long-term reputation and, compliance with the new way.
That commitment to pain, to taking the hit.
Yeah.
It seems like it had a profound strategic outcome. It changed the whole financial trajectory of the company, didn't it?
It really did.
Because the R&D investment that followed seemed laser-focused, almost entirely on component mastery.
Precisely. The new management initiative immediately channeled huge amounts of capital, preemptively, into R&D and design capabilities, specifically targeting high-margin digital components.
But what made it so effective? Was it just the money?
Well, the money was huge, obviously, but it was also the timing. Samsung was early, very early, in recognizing the shift from older static memory to dynamic memory, DRAM, and they aggressively invested in high-density chip production way ahead of most competitors.
So what was the specific tech or timing that really locked in this advantage? The thing that made memory chips their financial engine for, 3 decades.
It was their speed in mastering advanced DRAM fabrication, specifically getting high yields, meaning lots of working chips per silicon wafer on the 64-megabit DRAM chip back in the mid-1990s.
64-megabit DRAM.
Okay. They were often a full generation ahead of rivals. And that gave them the ability to just flood the market with high-performance chips at really competitive prices.
Driving out competitors.
Effectively bankrupting smaller competitors, yeah. And establishing this huge financial moat. That component dominance, being the best in the world at making the critical, expensive parts everyone else needs, that's what has financially sustained the organization and fueled its expansion ever since.
It's a remarkably sophisticated operating model, especially for a group with this level of complexity. And it seems like it defined a key leadership paradox that still exists today.
Yeah, the leadership model established during that time is really critical to understand. Lee Kun-hee maintained this almost non-negotiable, centralized, strategic direction, like the massive capital spending for semiconductors.
Top-down strategy.
Very top-down on the big bets. But at the same time, he granted vast, decentralized operational autonomy to the specialized subsidiaries. Think Samsung Heavy Industries or their construction units. They had freedom to operate within their domains.
So it's this paradoxical style, centralized strategic vision combined with decentralized operational freedom.
Exactly. And that paradox is arguably what prevents the massive cable structure from collapsing under its own bureaucratic weight. It enables these long-term, decade-spanning bets that, pure public companies, driven by quarterly results, often just can't make.
Okay, so that successful yet incredibly complex structure leads us directly to the present day. When we talk about Samsung now, we just have to talk about the sheer, almost mind-bending scope of this vast integrated empire.
It's huge.
As we noted earlier, Samsung Electronics and its subsidiaries reported consolidated revenue. What was it? $220.84 billion USD in 2025, trailing 12 months.
Yeah, and just to clarify for listeners, trailing 12 months, or PTM, that's basically the sum of a company's financial performance over the last year. Gives you a really current snapshot of its economic power.
And that power extends way beyond phones and TVs.
Oh, far, far beyond consumer electronics. The group still operates businesses capable of building the world's tallest skyscrapers, like the Petronas Towers in Malaysia. They've got Samsung Heavy Industries, still one of the world's largest shipbuilders, significant presence in construction, engineering.
So the anchor is tech, but the scope is really global industry.
Absolutely.
And the architecture holding this entire kind of disparate structure together is that unique family-controlled South Korean cable system. We really need to unpack how that architecture works, because it seems to be the structural cause of the company's persistent governance issues.
Right. The mechanism of control, it relies on these intricate, layered cross-shareholding arrangements. It's not simple ownership.
Meaning the family doesn't just own a majority of Samsung Electronics stock.
Exactly. The Lee family only holds a modest direct stake in Samsung Electronics itself. Their control over the entire ecosystem, it's exerted indirectly, through affiliate holdings. Notably, Samsung Life Insurance and Samsung C&T, that's the trading and construction arm.
Okay, so how does that work? Samsung C&T owns shares in Samsung Life Insurance,
Which in turn holds shares in Samsung Electronics.
which then holds shares in other affiliates. It's like a circle.
It's exactly like that, a complex circular structure. It ensures resilience against hostile external takeover bids, which is one reason they do it. But it's inherently opaque, very hard for outsiders to fully map out.
And the result is?
The result is it allows the controlling Lee family to exert disproportionate, highly centralized influence over the entire group's management, its strategy, and crucially, its massive capital allocation decisions, all without needing to own a majority of the actual equity.
That structure, while maybe strategically resilient, like you said, it creates a clear governance vulnerability, that opacity, that centralized power. It's repeatedly led to these persistent legal and ethical challenges involving the top leadership.
Yeah, the governance risk is severe, it's systemic. The sources detail this extensively. This system places extraordinary power in the hands of essentially one family, and it has led to these really high-profile convictions.
Let's look at the history there. Chairman Lee Kun-hee, the one who drove the quality revolution,
Yeah.
he faced significant legal issues himself, right?
He did, including a conviction and a 2-year sentence back in 1996 for bribery. He was later convicted again and fined, I think it was around $80 million.
But did he serve time?
Crucially, no. He was pardoned twice, once in 1996, again in 2009. And the justification often cited was that it was in the national economic interest to have him leading Samsung.
And this pattern, this cycle of legal challenge followed by government clemency, it seems to have continued with the next generation, the current leader, Vice Chairman Lee Jae-young.
Yes, absolutely. Lee Jae-young faced very similar scrutiny. He was convicted for bribery, tax evasion, other charges, resulted in a 2.5-year sentence in 2021.
And how long did he serve?
He was released after only 7 months in August 2021, thanks again to a presidential pardon.
So the pattern holds.
The pattern highlights this unique, almost symbiotic relationship between the K-ball and the South Korean state. The business is often viewed as simply too critical to the nation's economic health to allow its leaders to be, well, incapacitated for long.
The structural issue is clear. The history is clear. But let's ask the critical question. Why does this chronic legal drama, this structural opacity, why does it matter to the global economy? To, say, an engineer in Silicon Valley or a data center manager in Europe? What's the so what?
Right, the so what, because Samsung isn't just another phone company. It is an absolutely essential production hub for the world's most advanced silicon. Their foundries, their factories, they produce critical components for NVIDIA, for AMD, Qualcomm, Apple, you name it.
Pretty much everyone.
Pretty much everyone who matters in high-end tech. So this persistent governance risk, it's actually a global financial and geopolitical vulnerability because any instability, any major management distraction at the very top of Samsung
Could disrupt everything.
it could immediately disrupt the global supply chain for advanced semiconductors, memory chips, logic chips. The scale of their technological dominance means the stability of their leadership is directly tied to the stability of the world's entire tech pipeline.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Doesn't this highly centralized, maybe opaque structure, despite all the legal risks, doesn't it actually enable the speed and the massive long-term capital investment needed for these super high-risk projects, like the 2-nanometer chip transition we'll talk about later? Investments a typical quarterly-driven public company might just balk at.
That's the absolute core paradox of the cable. You've hit it. The cable architecture, you could argue, is the necessary engine for achieving this kind of scale and taking these huge risks. Because the family controls the strategic direction through those cross-shareholdings, they can mandate colossal long-term capital expenditure. We're talking like $100+ billion needed for advanced chip manufacturing plans.
Without needing shareholder approval every quarter.
Exactly, without having to constantly satisfy short-term activist shareholders demanding immediate returns. It grants them the strategic patience required to dominate really capital-intensive industries like memory chips and logic foundry services.
So the risk is the price you pay for that centralized patience.
You could see it that way. The risk, the governance instability, the potential for scandal is the potential cost of that long-term strategic capability. It's a trade-off. Okay, so that component dominance we just discussed, built over decades, That's the real source of their current financial strength. Samsung's power today lies in their unparalleled vertical integration.
Meaning they make the parts and the final product.
Right. It's the ability to leverage their command over components, specifically memory and display technology, to differentiate their own final products, like phones and TVs.
They essentially control their own internal supply chain, which must guarantee some level of profitability even when, say, the smartphone market gets super competitive and margins get squeezed.
That's a huge part of it. But let's look closer at the core memory business right now, because it's actually undergoing a strategic shift that, well, looks kind of confusing on the surface.
How so? What's happening?
Well, the data, our sources highlight that Samsung's global DRAM market share actually dropped quite sharply. It went from something like 42.2% in 2023 down to around 32.7% in the first half of 2025.
Dropped. That sounds bad. Losing market share, especially when competitors like SK Hynix are gaining. That seems like a failure, doesn't it?
It looks like a failure if you only look at volume share. But the deeper analysis suggests this is actually a calculated trade-off.
A trade-off. They're choosing to lose share.
In a way, yes. They appear to be intentionally sacrificing raw volume for higher profitability, specifically in the high-value segment of the market.
Okay, explain that nuance. What's the high-value segment?
AI, Samsung is directing its manufacturing capacity away from lower-margin commodity DRAM, the standard stuff that goes in PCs, which is easily price-matched by competitors. Instead, they're focusing resources almost exclusively on high-value, high-density products that are absolutely essential for AI servers.
Things like HBM.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking components like high bandwidth memory or HBM3E and high density DDR5 memory. These are critical for AI accelerators for GPUs doing heavy AI training.
And the margins are better on that stuff.
Significantly better. The margins on HBM, for example, command a huge premium, often 2 to 3 times the price of commodity DRAM. So Samsung is choosing quality of revenue over sheer quantity of market share. It's actually a pretty sophisticated move.
So while a competitor might be shipping more sticks of generic memory, Samsung is focusing on maximizing its profit per silicon wafer by targeting these specialized, complex, high-margin AI components.
That's the strategy in a nutshell. And this internal component control, this mastery of the parts inside the device, that's where the structural advantage really kicks in, regardless of what the external market fluctuations are doing.
Give me some numbers on that internal control.
Sure. Samsung leads the smartphone memory market that's both NAND flash and DRAM, with over 50% market share as of Q2 2025.
Over half the market for the memory in smartphones.
Yeah, so think about it. No matter which competitor sells the most phones globally, whether it's Apple, Xiaomi, whoever, Samsung ensures component profitability because chances are their memory is inside.
And displays too, right?
Same story.
Hello.
They also dominate the smartphone display panel market, holding nearly 40% global market share in mobile OLED panels, another critical high-value component they control.
And that vertical component power, it must translate directly into leadership for their own end products, especially in those massive consumer markets like TVs and phones, where they can use their own best stuff first.
It does. In the global TV market, for example, Samsung remains the dominant leader. They command about a 28.90% share, and they're accelerating the push into high-margin, premium displays like QD OLED monitors, directly leveraging their internal expertise in display tech.
Okay, and what about mobile? The mobile experience or MX division?
There, they hold about 19.9% of the global smartphone market currently.
And the strategy in mobile? It seems focused on maintaining profitability, maybe even more than holding the absolute top volume spot globally.
It absolutely looks like a flagship-first approach, especially for the latter half of 2025. They're prioritizing the high-margin premium devices, think they're foldables, which are unique, and the upcoming S25 series flagships.
And AI is key there too.
Crucially, yes, they're embedding and really emphasizing on-device AI functionality across all tiers, not just the flagships, but even the mid-range Galaxy A series. This rapid democratization of AI putting it everywhere. It's key to maintaining high average selling prices and differentiating the entire Galaxy ecosystem. Galaxy AI is the brand now.
And this whole strategy components, flagships, AI, it seems to be paying off, particularly in a really competitive and high-value market like the U.S.
Indeed. The data we have shows significant growth there. A 38% shipment growth between Q2 2024 and Q2 2025 in the U.S. market.
38% growth, that's huge.
It is. They achieved 31% market share in the U.S. in that period. This rebound really demonstrates the effectiveness of their strategy. Prioritize the best foldables, embed the most advanced AI features across the lineup, and couple that with aggressive marketing in those key high-value demographics. It seems to be working.
Okay, so if the past was defined by that big shift from volume to quality, Samsung's long-term future seems to hinge almost entirely on the success of its semiconductor business.
Yeah, the really capital-intensive parts, the foundry division, which makes logic chips for others, and the memory division. This is where the high-stakes bet on integrated AI truly begins.
This is the engine for future profitability, then.
It has to be. The foundry division specifically is locked in this global wrestling match against giants like TSMC in Taiwan and now Intel Foundry Services, or IFS, trying to make a comeback.
And the prizes?
Supremacy in sub-3 nanometer chip manufacturing. Control over these incredibly advanced logic nodes dictates who gets to fabricate the next generation of custom generative AI accelerators, the chips powering the AI revolution, and other high-performance computing components.
So, in this intensely competitive race, what's the single most critical metric for Samsung? What do they absolutely have to nail?
It's the 2 nanometer process node. That's the big one. They call their version SF2. This is the pivotal near-term target for their future relevance in leading-edge logic.
2 nanometers. And that uses a new type of transistor tech, right? GAA.
Exactly. The 2 nanometer process utilizes the second generation of gate-all-around, or GAA, transistors. Samsung refers to its proprietary version as MBCFET architecture.
Okay, let's pause there. Because GAA, gate-all-around, that sounds highly technical, and you're saying it's the key to this massive bet.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a kind of functional explanation?
Yeah.
Why is GAA such a huge risk, but also potentially a huge reward?
Okay, sure. Think of it this way. Traditional transistors, the ones we've used for years called FinFETs, they act sort of like a bridge where the electrical current flows over a gate that controls it.
Right.
GAA transistors are revolutionary because the gate completely surrounds the channel where the current flows, hence gate all around, like a tube around the wire, controlling it from all sides.
And why is that better?
This structure allows for much, much tighter control over power leakage, electrons escaping when they shouldn't, and that control is absolutely critical for these incredibly densely packed AI chips that need to perform trillions of calculations per second without overheating or just consuming insane amounts of power.
So it's about power efficiency and performance density.
Exactly, but the challenge is manufacturing it reliably. GAA is exceptionally difficult to achieve high manufacturing yield on this, meaning getting enough working chips from each expensive silicon wafer.
Which makes Samsung's aggressive timeline a gamble.
It makes their target for mass production in 2025 a really high-stakes technical gamble. If they nail it, it validates their aggressive high-risk bet on jumping to GAA early.
And if they fail? If the yields aren't there?
Failure to meet that deadline or hitting it with poor yields would reinforce rival leadership, particularly TSMC. It could be catastrophic for their long-term position in providing the infrastructure for AI.
Okay, so to win this race, Samsung isn't just selling chip-making services like a traditional foundry. They're using their unique conglomerate structure, their vertical integration, as a sales tool.
That's the pitch. They are offering an integrated one-stop shop solution that a pure-play foundry like TSMC simply cannot match.
How does that synergy work in practice? What does the one-stop shop actually offer a customer?
Well, unlike a pure-play foundry that only makes the logic chip, Samsung can bundle its leading-edge logic fabrication from the foundry division.
The 2 nanometer process, hopefully.
Right. With its internally optimized advanced memory, like HBM or high-speed DRAM NAND from its memory division.
Okay, logic and memory together.
And then they layer on top their deep expertise in actually integrating those complex components into finished end products, expertise gained from running their huge mobile experience division.
So they can help design the whole package.
They can offer a much more integrated design and manufacturing approach. And this is immensely appealing to major clients. Think large tech companies designing their own specialized AI chips. They need customized, optimized memory like HBM, built and packaged right alongside their complex logic chips, ideally all under one roof with one partner managing the complexity.
And Samsung is betting big on this bundled strategy paying off.
Hugely. They're aiming to grow their AI-related semiconductor revenue by a staggering 9-fold by 2028, based largely on the success of this bundled integrated strategy.
A 9-fold increase.
Yeah.
Wow. And that ambitious goal has to be supported by a fundamental transformation happening in the memory division itself, right?
Yeah.
Shifting away from generic commodity memory towards these highly specialized AI components we talked about.
Absolutely. The memory business is relentlessly transforming. It has to meet the just unprecedented demand coming from AI accelerators and cloud data centers. They're aggressively expanding production of high bandwidth memory. HBM3E is the current hot ticket, which stacks memory layers vertically to deliver data incredibly fast to the processor.
What else?
They're also developing next-generation graphics memory like 24GB GBDR7 for high-end GPUs and AI workstations. And they're pushing large, high-density NAND flash solutions because you need vast amounts of storage for the training data sets used by these large language models, or LLMs.
In this advanced component manufacturing, this internal capability, it creates a powerful feedback loop internally, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Giving the end product side of the business, the phones, the TVs, a significant advantage over competitors who have to rely on fragmented external supply chains.
It creates tremendous synergy. It's a real competitive advantage. The foundry and memory divisions provide internally optimized components, like advanced LPDDR5X, that's low-powered double data rate memory, absolutely crucial for running complex AI models on the device on your phone without draining the battery in an hour. Or high-density NAND for storing the AI models themselves.
And having those advanced parts internally.
It directly allows the MX division, the phone guys, to deploy cutting-edge technologies like these on-device LLMs faster and more cohesively than competitors can. It reduces costs, it accelerates their innovation cycles, and it helps ensure component quality and supply.
This internal collaboration, it feeds directly into their overarching strategic goal, which you mentioned. Ambient intelligence. AI is becoming the new organizing principle for the whole company, moving far beyond just simple voice assistants into something much more pervasive, more proactive.
Yeah, the goal is astonishingly aggressive. They want to integrate their Galaxy AI into 400 million devices by the end of 2025.
400 million.
400 million. And ambient intelligence, as they define it, is AI that's seamless, intuitive, proactive, deeply integrated into your daily life, not something you have to constantly interact with consciously.
How do they achieve that technically?
Well, it requires deploying sophisticated but efficient, smaller-scale, large language models directly onto consumer electronics, smartphones, TVs, wearables, maybe even appliances down the line. They're using advanced research in areas like efficient knowledge distillation methods to shrink these powerful models down.
So the ultimate goal isn't just to sell you the hardware, the phone, or the watch. It's to lock you into this continuous, personalized data experience that learns from everything you own that has a Samsung logo on it.
That is the ultimate competitive moat they're trying to build. By deploying these advanced LLMs across this huge hardware ecosystem, phones, watches, the upcoming smart rings, TVs, maybe refrigerators, Samsung is creating a persistent, personalized data feedback loop.
How does that loop work?
Well, this continuous data flow, tracking how you use all these devices, generates massive proprietary data sets. That data then enhances their customized AI models and predictive capabilities. The intelligence becomes uniquely customized to you.
And the more Samsung hardware you own.
The stronger the lock-in within the Galaxy ecosystem becomes, the AI gets better, more personalized, making it harder to switch away.
Okay, so beyond the devices we carry today, Samsung is also looking ahead, trying to dominate future standards too, particularly 6G connectivity, which seems way out there when most people are still getting used to 5G.
They're definitely positioning themselves for early influence in 6G. Samsung is a key founding member of something called the AI RAN Alliance. RAN stands for Radio Access Network.
AI RAN, what's that?
They actually demonstrated a significant AI RAN breakthrough at Mobile World Congress back in 2025. It uses artificial intelligence to dynamically optimize the wireless network's efficiency, which can significantly reduce energy costs for operators.
So it's about efficiency, not just speed.
Critically, yes. Their 6G strategy seems to emphasize improved user experience metrics. They're focusing on things like longer battery life for devices, more seamless connectivity, better reliability, not just chasing headline gigabit speeds.
Interesting. And finally, in this future-looking section, they seem to be leveraging their massive device base to make a serious push into the rapidly expanding digital health and robotics space.
Yeah, they clearly recognize the macro shift happening towards care at home, driven by aging populations globally and rising healthcare costs. Samsung sees its deep market penetration in the home as a major structural advantage here.
How are they capitalizing on that?
Well, their acquisition of a digital health platform called Zelf is key. Zelf basically creates a functional, iPay-compliant bridge It links consumer home health monitoring data stuff from devices like their smartwatches, the upcoming smart rings, with professional clinical decision-making systems used by doctors and hospitals.
So connecting your watch data to your doctor.
Essentially, yes. And they're heavily investing in R&D for new non-invasive health sensors. Things like continuous blood pressure monitoring, maybe even glucose tracking eventually, for future wearable devices. This fundamentally shifts their product value proposition beyond communication and entertainment towards preventative health management.
Okay, so Samsung's future, while it sounds technologically aggressive and potentially revolutionary with AI, it's not without some severe operational and geopolitical risks. The company operates right at the delicate nexus of the U.S.-China technological competition. That makes it strategically vital, but also inherently vulnerable.
Absolutely. They have to very delicately navigate these stringent U.S. export controls, the ones aiming to restrict China's access to the most advanced chip-making technology and equipment.
How does that affect Samsung directly?
Well, this complex geopolitical volatility, it puts pressure on Samsung's ability to operate and invest in its massive manufacturing facilities inside China, particularly concerning the use of advanced nodes, the ones needed for their big AI pivot. It complicates things significantly.
But on the flip side, these U.S. restrictions, they also inadvertently create a kind of unstated high-margin advantage for Samsung, don't they?
That's the other side of the coin. You could call it a geopolitical shield. By restricting China's ability to develop competitive parity in cutting-edge sub-5 nanometer chips, U.S. policy effectively secures a high-margin, almost captive market for the big U.S. fabless firms.
Like NVIDIA, AMD.
Exactly. Those companies must rely on Samsung and TSMC, its main rival, for their cutting-edge production needs. So Samsung's strategic alignment with U.S. policy, at least on these advanced nodes, helps protect its most profitable high-end component business.
But they can't just ignore China.
No way. They can't ignore China's long-term threat. The Made in China 2025 strategy and subsequent initiatives aim to eventually erode Samsung's market share, particularly in more mature chip technologies, through massive state-backed domestic production in China. That's a slower burn, but a definite long-term risk.
So the external geopolitical risks are significant, but they're matched by some pretty severe internal execution risks too, right? Specifically concerning that aggressive roadmap for advanced silicon fabrication, we talked about the 2-nanometer GAA process.
Yes. The success of their entire AI pivot, arguably, hinges on flawless operational execution in the foundry division, specifically on hitting that 2-nanometer target.
And the risk is yield.
The main risk is yield. Failure to meet that aggressive 2-nanometer mass production target in 2025 because of yield issues, meaning they just can't produce enough working chips per wafer, economically, could immediately cede long-term logic leadership to rivals like TSMC.
Which would undermine the whole strategy.
It would seriously compromise their integrated one-stop-shop strategy we discussed, and it would likely derail that ambitious goal of securing a 9-fold increase in AI-related revenue by 2028. The difficulty of mastering GAA technology means the margin for error here is razor thin. It has to work and work well.
And then there's the persistent issue we discussed earlier, casting a shadow over everything, the chaebol governance drag. The need for absolute management focus on these huge technical challenges is paramount, yet the leadership structure itself is inherently vulnerable to distraction from regulatory scrutiny and legal issues.
Exactly right. Continued public pressure, regulatory pressure over the opaque cross-shareholding structure, and the ongoing legal scrutiny surrounding the leadership. It constantly risks distracting senior management from the absolutely critical, long-term pivots they need to execute flawlessly.
Like 2-nanometer, 6G, ambient AI.
All of it. Navigating the sheer complexity of the global AI race requires total dedication, total focus from the top. The concern, often voiced by analysts, is that the hierarchical, sometimes rigid chaebol management style might lack the necessary agility and continuous focus required to succeed against competitors operating under different, perhaps more transparent, corporate governance regimes. Leadership excellence is key, and any distraction is a problem. Hashtag #OutTread_Outro.
So what does this all mean? As we look back over this deep dive, Samsung's history is just this relentless path of aggressive risk-taking, from allegedly using reconstruction aid for early expansion all the way to that radical cultural shift from volume to quality.
Yeah, all sustained by this aggressive strategy of component dominance. We've seen a company that built its core profitability on making preemptive, massive investments in components, especially memory.
While navigating persistent legal turmoil at the top and simultaneously building this almost unbelievably vast conglomerate structure.
And today, that component dominance is fueling another massive pivot. This time towards vertical integration built around ambient AI and the most advanced silicon manufacturing on the planet, aiming, as we said, to integrate intelligence into 400 million devices. It's audacious.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, the final thought perhaps. Samsung's entire strategy requires that this vast, incredibly complex, and let's be honest, sometimes ethically murky structure of the cable.
Yeah.
It has to function perfectly to execute these massive bets on 2-nanometer chips and ambient AI.
It demands near-perfect execution across the board.
So you, the listener, have to consider the future here. Can the sheer power of its vertical integration, its ability to make everything, truly overcome the persistent risk embedded in its centralized, family-controlled governance structure?
Or is the latter, that centralized, high-stakes, risk-taking leadership model, the K-ball itself actually the necessary engine that enables the former, the vertical integration and audacious bets, to succeed in the first place? It's a fundamental question.
The complexity of their structure is, as you said, both their greatest competitive advantage, enabling that vertical synergy, that strategic patience.
And potentially their greatest point of vulnerability. It really is a high-stakes, almost all-or-nothing bet on technological execution, backed by massive concentrated capital and a unique controversial structure.
Something profound to mull over next time you charge your phone or turn on your TV. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex world of Samsung.